Occult Confessions is brought to you commercial-free through the generous support of our patrons. Visit occultconfessions.com and click on Donate to help keep the history of the occult on the digital airwaves. In the absence of the author, or rather compiler of the following work, who was kidnapped and carried away from the village of Catavia on the 11th day of September 1826 by a number of Freemasons, it devolves upon the publisher to attempt to set forth some of the leading views that governed those who embarked in the undertaking. Masonry gives rogues and evil-minded characters an opportunity of visiting upon their devoted victim all the ills attending combined power when exerted to accomplish destruction. It works unseen at all silent hours and secret times and places, and like death when summoning his diseases pounces upon its devoted subject and lays him prostrate in the dust. Like the great enemy of man, it has shown its cloven foot and put the public upon its guard against its secret machinations. We now aver, in defiance of whatever may be said to the contrary, no matter by whom, how exalted his rank, that this book is what it pretends to be, that it is a master key to the secrets of Masonry, that in the pages before him, the man of candor and inquiry can judge for himself, and then a proper judgment will be formed of our intention. So wrote David C. Miller in December 1826 in Illustrations of Masonry by one who has devoted 30 years to the subject. The book was ascribed to William Morgan, who had disappeared 3 months earlier, except that Morgan had passed all of his manuscripts on to a pair of Masons shortly before his disappearance, and Miller's partner-turned-enemy had seized all the printed sheets of the book before Miller could print anything. What Miller ended up printing was largely plagiarized from an earlier exposé of the Masons, but few of his contemporaries seemed to notice. The book was heavily pirated, and a small fire that damaged little in Miller's office raised a public sentiment against the Masons, much as Miller had hoped. By the 13th of January, the first anti-Masonic convention was organized in Seneca, New York, and everyone wondered what on earth the Masons had done with William Morgan. My name is Dr. Robert C. Thompson, and that's right, my friends, it is time for the anti-Masonry movement in America, and if we're combining secret organizations and murder, who else would I have here but Savannah Verrett?
Oh, okay.
Oh, and
Hello.
politics.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
great.
It's the anti-Masonic party. It's a political party.
Okay.
Yeah, for real.
Interesting. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, you're going to get into it. I don't think many people have. They didn't last long. They only lasted a couple years.
I don't really know much about the Masons either, if I'm being honest.
We're going to do a bit of that. I mean, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But we're going to talk about like Masonry in America and just like the culture of it as opposed to like the rituals and all that sort of stuff. So that's not happening today, FYI, friends. But we are going to talk about Masonry in America, yeah, like I said, and what was going on at the time. Let me just make a quick plug. We'll get to patrons next episode, but in this episode, summer is usually the dry season for us patron-wise. And I do want to encourage everyone to get out there and patronize us if you can. Certainly, media in general is under attack. We do not feel under attack. However, we are in a polarized world, right? And it is a bold enough thing for us to come out with a podcast every other week that does not engage in that polarization or in that sensationalization or any of the sloppy nonsense that we see in media. We're just out here to tell a good story and get at the truth of how our culture functions and what happened in history. So if that is meaningful to you, consider donating to us at any dollar amount, and we would be very grateful, and it would give you access to all of our bonus content. Plenty of bonus episodes out there for you to enjoy. Let's pledge it out. We, the members of the secret order of alchemical actors, do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it. All right, so Savannah, just, to get you ready for this, a man will disappear.
Oh, okay.
A political party will be started.
Okay.
And a body will show up in a body of water.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering if I'll be able to see like the foreshadowing and predict when it's going to happen and
When
stuff.
the body shows up in the water. I can see it floating to the surface. Masonry traveled from Europe to America, specifically Boston and Charleston. Those were the two cities where it got started. That's where the first lodges were formed. Henry Price.
They're still around, right?
Oh, yeah. There's Freemasons. I mean, it's not what it used to be.
Okay.
But
because I'm pretty sure I've seen them in Easton and stuff.
My cousin's husband is a Mason. Yeah.
Oh.
And when I started my career as an artist in, Hamilton, New Jersey, the Masonic Temple is where we did some of our shows. We would book their hall, to perform.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's fun.
There's different variations on Masonry, which we won't get into here, but there's a Scottish rite and all this different stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
But they're all Masons of one stripe or another. Maybe Masons can disagree with me. I know we have Masonic listeners. Let me know. Different rituals, different approaches.
No, don't tell us we're wrong. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, I don't pretend to know much about the variations of Masonry, the sects of Masonry. But yes, they still exist. Henry Price.
Sorry,
Okay.
And this might be a stupid question, but I mean, does it have anything to do with like literal masonry?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It is symbolic masonry.
Oh.
Yes, versus literal masonry. Although there were some actual bricklayers who were Freemasons.
Well, yeah, I imagine
and
bricklayers can be any walk of life.
It's sort of a symbolic laying of the brick.
Okay. Is that part of where the name came from?
My understanding is, and again, Masonic listeners check in. Savannah's like quizzing me on things I wasn't necessarily prepared for, but that King Solomon built the first temple right in Jerusalem. And so the Freemasons are like modeled after him. They're builders of temples.
Oh.
You see all the symbolism there.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
That's my take anyway. Henry Price was the first American Grand... Anything else?
Not at the moment. I'm sure I'll think of more questions.
Do you want to know who the first American Grand Master was?
Sure.
It was Henry Price.
Okay.
And Benjamin Franklin was the first master of Philadelphia's lodge.
Oh.
George Washington became a Mason in Virginia more than 2 decades before the American Revolution, and in his capacity as the United States' first president, he laid the cornerstone of the Capitol following Masonic ceremonial procedures. So there yet again.
Yes, much like a bricklayer.
Much like a bricklayer. But of course, he didn't then proceed to build the entire building.
Okay.
Symbolic masonry.
Got it.
John Marshall, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was another prominent Mason among the founding fathers. And in the subsequent generation, we had Henry Clay, Andrew Jackson, and DeWitt Clinton. Clinton maybe is a name you haven't heard before, but he built the Erie Canal. All these guys were Masons. And Andrew Jackson, his association with Masonry is, I think, an important driver of the anti-Masonic party because he was president at the time. So being anti-Masonic was being anti-Jacksonian.
Oh.
John Quincy Adams was president at the time of the Morgan Affair, today's events, and came out against the Masons, but he was replaced by Jackson so that anti-Jacksonian politics came to overlap with anti-Masonic politics, as I'm saying. So the Morgan Affair happens, and then as Jackson rises to power, the anti-Masons are the
Morgan Affair?
William Morgan disappears.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Today's floating body. Or not, actually.
No,
we don't know.
No,
it's a mystery.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, okay. William Morgan, who Savannah's inquiring about, and you all want to know, I know, where was he born? Where was he born and when? He was born in Culpeper County, Virginia, and it was the 7th of August, 1774. He married Lucinda Pendleton in October of 1819. He moved frequently, working as a brewer and a brick mason in Canada, Kentucky, Virginia, and New York. So this man is constantly on the move. At the time of his abduction, he was living in Batavia, New York, with his wife and 2 children. Morgan claimed to have served under Jackson at the famous Battle of New Orleans, but there was no record in the War Department to support this. He struggled with alcoholism and was called by associates bankrupt, an habitual liar, and low-down white trash.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Despite these purported faults, he was able to find himself in the company of reputable Freemasons, and so John C. Palmer, who chronicled these events a century later, argues that Morgan must have been a man of presentable appearance and plausible manner who wore out his welcome because of his lack of character.
Wow.
He's like a charming guy. When you get to know him, you realize he's not feeding his children and stuff. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. He was arrested for debt, and his inability to support his family made him a regular subject for support from the Masonic charity funds. Because Morgan, of course, was a Freemason. On the 31st of May, 1825, he was exalted to the degree of Royal Arch Mason in Leroy, New York.
So he still managed to work his way up, even with getting arrested and stuff?
Yes. I believe... Now, let me say this with a grain here. I've read, as I always do, a lot of primary sources. I've read pro-Morgan and anti-Morgan guys. If I was talking to a pro-Morgan guy, and, we are 190 years later, like, we don't have the strong feelings that these people had in it was 100 years later. No, 200 years later, sorry. 1826, right? It's been almost exactly 200 years. So we don't have the strong feelings these people had. So we have to read through what they're saying in that way. My suspicion is that what I've just said from John C. Palmer writing a century later is this is correct. He's kind of a grifter. Yeah. He's a grifter who's really good at persuading you that, he's like a salesman almost, but who happens to be a bricklayer. So he uses that knack to get into the Mason lodges. However, it is true. Like, if you asked the pro-Morgan guys, they would say this is sort of like a slander that was placed on him by his contemporaries. I mean, you could think about like Joseph Smith. I love Joseph Smith for this. Like, he's almost the same time period, Joseph Smith. But if you ask a Mormon in 1835 who Joseph Smith is, they'll say, oh, he's the prophet. He's, a man of God. He's very virtuous. If you ask an anti-Mormon, they'll say, well, he's the devil. He's Satan. He's lies. He's fooled all these people. So Morgan has a similar quality, although I think he's more obviously
a grifter.
Yeah,
it sounds like it.
Yeah, he's not writing any extensive, revelations or anything. Morgan claimed to have been a Mason in Canada. So to get more into Savannah's question here, so he claimed to have been a Mason in Canada, and he said that the New Yorkers' unfamiliarity with his approach to Masonry was a product of national differences.
But that's not true. He wasn't ever in Canada?
Arguably, or he was in Canada, but arguably he was not a Mason. But he came to New York and he was like, I was a Canadian Mason. That's why my handshakes,
that's awesome.
Got a little boot in there.
I love that. That's a good grift. I mean,
he's a clever guy. There were apparently regional differences in Masonic gestures and symbols, so that was true. And so Morgan's tale was plausible enough to the New Yorkers. In this way, Morgan appears to have leapfrogged into the Masonic system without having to do much work. Usually you have to work your way up from first degree, The Royal Arch in Leroy is the only degree ever associated with one William Morgan. Morgan lent his name to an application to establish a Royal Arch chapter in Batavia, but some of the other members objected to Morgan joining. They cited his careless habits and financial looseness and neglect of his family as the principal reasons that Morgan should not be admitted into the Batavia Lodge. So he was already a member, but he wants to be a charter member of a new lodge. And though initially, as everybody I think who meets this guy is like, oh yeah, he's a great guy.
He seems like a cool dude.
And then you get to know him, and you're like,
oh, your kids are dirty and hungry.
And you haven't seen them in 2 weeks.
Yeah. You keep bouncing around. Well, and I was thinking about that too. I was about to say earlier when you said that he's like constantly on the move, I was like, that's quite an accomplishment in this time period, but he might have to because he's constantly grifting people. He's like Harold Hill.
I think you
selling bands to children.
I don't have any evidence of Harold Hill-ness, but it's certainly possible. Because we only really care about him for these events. So what happens before these events is like not so clear. We do know that he's moving around though, and he moves to these different states. He's in the South, he's in the North, he's in Canada. So his name was dropped from the application when the charter was approved, Morgan was annoyed to discover that he was no longer on the list.
Did they like put out a list that being like, oh, these people get to move up in the world?
Well, so the Batavia Charter, like, we're chartering a new Masonic lodge, and they apply, I think, to the national organization or international organization. The international has to, stamp it.
I got it.
When they stamp it, all the names of the charter members are on there. And then they, I don't know, put it on the door or something. And when they do, he walks up to the door and he's like, hey, what the heck, you guys?
Okay.
You put my name on there. They're like, yeah, about that. So an argument ensued. In my version, apparently like right in front of the door where the list is posted. Morgan began to plot to write about exposing the Masons' secrets. Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's the rule number one in a secret organization.
Right. Do
You
not
don't
share
do
the
that.
secret. Even though, Mozart had already done it, right? But here he comes. He's going to do this. He filed for a copyright of a book titled Illustrations of Masonry by one of the fraternity. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That's the whole title.
That's a long title.
Well,
it's like a Robert Cousins title.
Well,
Sorry.
it's a good 19th century title. Then he hid himself in Rochester for 2 months for the purpose of writing his tome. So he literally hides himself away.
Yeah, you're exposing secrets of a secret organization. I would too.
Speaking of Joseph Smith, right? Holes up to write his book. David C. Miller, along with John Davids and Russell Dyer, contracted with him to publish the book. Miller had a printing office that published the Republican Advocate and had been nursing a grudge against the Albany Masons for keeping him stuck at the level of entered apprentice for 20 years.
Oh, no.
It was a little
they
bit.
hate this guy.
Yeah, it's like if we cast a kid in the chorus and we're like, yeah, next year we're going to give you some
Yeah,
lines.
speaking
And then the
role.
next year we're like, nah,
Yeah, sorry.
you're still a chorus guy, but you're so close. That's terrible. 20 years. So he was miffed.
I can't blame him if I'm being honest, but he probably deserved it if it was happening.
Right.
So.
That's entirely possible. Morgan presented him with a long-awaited opportunity for revenge. So he's just stewing in his printing office waiting for someone.
Somebody print something about the Masons. Because I'm still an apprentice, so I don't even know the secret.
Right. Yeah, there's not much for him to say. The Freemasons agreed that it would be best to keep silent on the book. So, okay, here comes this book, and they're like, okay, let's just not mention it.
Yeah.
Let's let it die from lack of press. Let it come and go without drawing attention to it.
It's not a bad move.
But then they completely changed their minds.
Oh, no. They read it, and they were like, this actually pisses me off.
I don't know if they ever got a chance to read it.
Oh.
I think as a group, this is like the opposite of a herd mentality. As a group, they got together and said, listen, the soundest thing to do is to do nothing. And then as they broke off into smaller groups, then they were like, but this really cheeses me off. And then they started causing trouble.
Okay.
So they started doing everything in their power to keep the book from being printed at any cost. Most notoriously, a notice appeared in the Kannada papers instructing its readers to report to the nearest Mason the moment they came across Morgan or anything related to Morgan and his anti-Masonic activities. It's like an APB on this guy. He's like on the most wanted Mason list.
It's a good thing he moves around a lot.
Yeah, it's like you can feel the movie in this, right? Like
Yeah,
a guy
you
is
kinda
looking
can.
out for Masons around every corner. In the meantime,
I could add it to the Conjuring universe.
yeah.
The Warrens pop in time travel to help save him.
In the meantime, a Masonic sympathizer infiltrated Miller's organization. Daniel Johns entered into a partnership with Miller, obtained the manuscripts for an early part of the book, and then promptly handed them over to the Masons. On the 11th of September, 1826, Morgan was charged by an innkeeper named Ebenezer Kingsley of stealing a shirt and cravat in Canandaigua, New York. I know, not your cravat.
I know. Ebenezer. I didn't know people were actually named.
Yes, they were real Ebenezers. And he loved Christmas. He was acquitted of the charge almost as soon as he was brought in, raising the possibility that Kingsley had been induced to file a false or exaggerated charge to serve some conspiracy. But then Morgan was rearrested for a debt of $2.68. No small amount in 1826.
But that would probably be a lot more back then.
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah,
it? I mean, like,
It's still not a ton, but
it's like $10.
yeah, maybe $20. Yeah. $25.
Not that much, but that's still, I don't know.
Another
funny.
party paid his debt, and Morgan was discharged, being immediately, by the way, swept up into a coach with several men. So just to review these events. Probably, this is a guess, we can't be sure, somebody from the Masons or the anti-Morgan faction goes to Ebenezer and says, hey, did he borrow your cravat? And Ebenezer's like, yeah, he borrowed it. It's cool. And they're like, nah, he stole that. You're charging him with stealing from you. So that's the pretext on which he's arrested. But immediately Ebenezer's like, nah, I'm cool with this guy.
I don't want to lie.
Right. So they get a different guy.
Said, I saw 3 ghosts and one told me if I keep being a dick, then I'm not going to heaven.
If I don't let this guy go, he can have my... I've been giving cravats away to all these little boys on the street.
What day is it? It's a cravat.
So... But the Masons aren't happy, right? So in the jail, they're like, wait a second, get the other innkeeper. Because remember, this guy's a drinker.
Yeah.
So he definitely owes bar tabs. So now they're going to hold him on the bar tab at a different inn.
Got it.
But
for
then
$2.
For $2, yeah.
60 cents.
But then his friends come in and pay $2.68. And they're like, God damn. At this point,
He's
the
so
Masons...
slippery.
Yeah. But he's still in one place, and so rather than whatever, they slip him into a coach and carry him off.
Yikes.
It's also possible, so another version of this, that in the last instance, it is the Masons themselves who pay the $2.68 in order to then spirit him off in the carriage.
Because they want to murder him?
Yeah, we're going to... That's the question. That is today's big question. There was a commotion on the way into the carriage, and Morgan lost his hat.
Oh, no.
It happens sometimes.
I can see the movie scene right now. It's like black and white, and they drag him in, and his hat is lying there, and you focus on the hat as the carriage is driving away.
See it driving off into the distance. Later, witnesses testified that Morgan was blindfolded and moved between different carriages on his way north and west.
Jeez.
One of the carriage drivers reported that Morgan appeared to move between carriages willingly and without much compulsion. Somehow Morgan found his way across western New York to Fort Niagara, more than 100 miles away on Lake Ontario. Governor DeWitt Clinton issued a reward for Morgan's safe return home. Because, after all, he's not a criminal. Technically.
They paid his bail.
Paid his bucks. It's $2. It's almost $3. Nearly $3. Indictments were issued against Nicholas Cheeseborough, Lowton Lawson, Edwin Sawyer, and John Sheldon. Cheeseborough, Sawyer, and Lawson pled guilty to a conspiracy to seize and transport Morgan. Sheldon was also found guilty. Eli Bruce, sheriff of Niagara County, was removed from office. All 4 spent time in jail. John Whitney was also charged. Whitney had left Rochester in the winter after Morgan's disappearance without making arrangements for his family or business, and traveled to New Orleans with another conspirator, Burrage Smith, I should say, who died before he could be put on trial. So very weird behavior, right?
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
So they know for sure that he was actually taken by the Masons. That's not the mystery.
He was taken by these dudes, yeah. We know that for a fact. What happened after that is where the mystery kicks in. They were found guilty, and many of them did.
And they were
confess.
Masons.
Yes, these guys were associated with Masonry. Sheriff Bruce testified, not all of them, I don't think, but many of them. Sheriff Bruce testified to seeing Whitney in Niagara, where Morgan was being kept, and Whitney ended up serving 18 months for his involvement. A year later, so, okay, that's it, right? All done. Case closed.
This
was a quick episode. He's still missing. We have not found him, but we've charged all these guys with spiriting him off. The question remains, where the hell is William Morgan? A year later, on the 7th of October, 1827, a man's body. Oh, you should have guessed.
Oh,
this was the moment,
no.
right?
I was just so enraptured by your storytelling.
Oh, see, it was an exciting story. I really got into this research, too, more than I thought I would.
This is interesting.
So on the 7th of October, 1827, a man's body washed ashore on the beach at Oak Orchard Harbor, New York. This is, for those of you who are interested, 40 miles below Fort Niagara, where my man was last seen.
It's a long time. I mean, it's a pretty
It's
far
been a year.
distance. Yeah.
It's been a year and it's 40 miles, but you got to figure, like, it's traveling down the water, right?
Oh, is it a rotted corpse? Like it looks like it's been traveling for a year?
It doesn't really get into... Well, we'll talk about it. I'll let you decide for yourself when I describe the autopsy situation. So the body is discovered by 2 men, this is like the beginning of Twin Peaks, named Potter and Hoxie at the point where Oak Orchard Creek empties into Lake Ontario, and they reported their discovery to the coroner. When the coroner could find no means...
To the coroner?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is how this worked back then. Like, people were more intimately familiar with who their coroner was. So when you find a body, you don't necessarily assume foul play, so you wouldn't call the cops.
Oh.
You call the coroner to come and, investigate, because it's a body. There's no crime in progress. Yeah.
Interesting. Because my first thought, but I live in the modern era.
It's to call the cops.
Call the cops.
Yeah, we do call the cops are like the go-to for us now.
Yeah,
but I think back then you would just figure out, well, which dude would I call for this?
Okay.
This is a body, so we call the coroner.
Okay.
When the coroner could find no means of identifying the body, he ordered the man buried near the spot where he was found. On reading of the unidentified corpse, a very important character to today's story, Edward Thurlow Weed. He was the editor of the Rochester Telegraph and a rising political organizer, what we'd call a political boss in Western New York. We don't really have these guys anymore, but, these were the guys that ran these, like, intense local political parties that would make sure their candidates got elected. They really went to battle with each other over these elections. So Weed brought as many men as could identify Morgan to Oak Orchard Harbor and began to make his way. So he makes his way to Oak Orchard with these guys.
How did they even hear about this body?
I think that it's printed in the newspaper. A body was discovered and buried in Oak Orchard Harbor. And so he reads
it and is like, that could be our
that
guy
could be William Morgan.
A year ago?
Yes,
that
could be William Morgan.
Crazy.
The body was disinterred, and the coroner began swearing in witnesses to testify about what they knew. Morgan's widow was also in attendance to inspect the body and reported that the clothes were not the same as those her husband wore to leave the house the year before, bearing in mind, of course, that in 1826 you did not have as many outfits as we have today. So this is a very, she would know his clothes.
Got it.
But
he was also taken for a bit, so they probably could have put him in.
It's possible. It's possible. She believed the body was Morgan, though, basing her conclusion on a scar that she saw on his foot that matched a mark on her husband's foot. So that's, I think, her main point of argument. So how identifiable the body is, I'm not so sure.
Well, I guess if it was fresh, it would be a lot more identifiable. So maybe
it would have been a year, in the water. Ugh.
Yeah.
In September, investigators had drug the lake for 3 weeks in the region where they believed Morgan had been tossed into the water. Excited citizens believed the dredgers had unknowingly knocked Morgan's body loose and that it then drifted downstream where it was discovered at the harbor. So this is the logic of why it's taken a year.
Got it.
But this wasn't the only possible explanation for the mysterious body's appearance in Oak Orchard Creek. A month earlier, Timothy Monroe was returning home to Clark Township in Newcastle, Canada, when his rowboat capsized and he drowned. In addition to Lucinda Morgan, Monroe's wife, Sarah Monroe, came to the harbor with her son to see the body that had been recovered. The corpse had been buried a second time after being identified as Morgan.
Oh my God, this poor body.
Now been buried twice and resurrected twice. And now it needed to be dug up again for the Monroes to inspect it. Mrs. Monroe's report of Timothy Monroe's clothing was accurate down to the smallest detail.
Oh, boy.
And a coroner's jury determined that the body formerly adjudicated to be Morgan's was actually Monroe's. Weed, remember my man, Thurlow Weed, not a happy man. Doesn't like this result.
Yeah, it would make him look a little dumb, a little foolish.
Ever afterward, he contended that Monroe's description of her husband's body was not a great match for the corpse, and that it was possible, as you mentioned, that Monroe's clothing had somehow found its way onto a different, similarly drowned person.
Yeah,
I mean, you didn't say that exactly.
Yeah, but the other woman said it to a T. So
Yes. It's weird.
Yeah. He just desperately wants to have an answer for it.
And the scar on the foot, I mean, how persuasive is that? That's really up to us, right? In addition to being a printer and a journalist, my man Weed was a politician, as I said, who had backed John Quincy Adams in his successful run for president. Weed aligned himself with the anti-Masons because he saw an advantage to be gained for his political position. He had no special feelings about Masonry, since by 1832 he supported the Freemason Henry Clay for president. But in 1827, Weed was thoroughly opposed to the presidency of the Freemason Andrew Jackson. You see how this is working?
Yeah.
I hesitate to draw contemporary political things.
Yeah, it might be risky.
Yeah. We try to stay out of modern politics. But it is a little bit like your favorite political candidate doing the exact same thing that your least favorite political candidate is doing, and you let him off the hook but you tear your candidate a new one for it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll do it this way, right? If my favorite guy raises the American deficit, I will say, well, that's no big deal. The deficit doesn't matter. But if the guy I hate raises the deficit, I say, oh, you're ruining America. We can't afford this giant national debt.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically the same thing with Masonry. It's just...
Got it.
Yeah. Nobody really cares. We're just using it to get a political advantage. An advocate for the Bank of Rochester, Weed disliked Jackson's politics. Jackson was famously very anti-national bank.
Oh.
He didn't want to have a national bank. I believe Jackson was big on the gold standard, as I recall from my American history.
It's funny that because I know the musical Hamilton really well. I was like, I know about Adams's presidency a little bit. They talk about that. They don't talk about the Freemasons in Hamilton. But Hamilton definitely would have been like, that guy.
Yeah.
With his whole...
Yeah, Andrew Jackson was a populist. So he's often compared to Donald Trump because he was a populist, but very anti-national bank as opposed to, the Federalists. Anyhow, and of course, John Quincy Adams, I think, was very much like Daddy. He loved federalism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they make fun of him in the musical because I
John
don't
Quincy
really,
Adams?
Yeah.
Or
I'm pretty sure.
John Adams.
Oh, I'm getting the two confused.
They're father and son.
Oh, okay. Yeah. John Adams, the second president, everybody makes fun of him for whatever reason in the musical because they're like, he did nothing. Apparently.
That's not fair. But
well, I'm just telling you what it says in the musical. They make fun of him constantly in
perhaps
the musical.
as president, but John Adams was a very influential figure for the revolution. Anyhow.
Maybe that's what they mean in the musical. They make fun of him.
He was
once
a lawyer,
he's
like a
president.
very strong thinker.
Anyhow, to say Hamilton's sorry.
But I mean, it's good to understand the politics, right? Because Weed is thinking in terms of Adams and is thinking in terms of we need, a national bank, national currency, all this sort of stuff. And Jackson is far more like we need to still be trading in like gold coins and bullion and stuff. Doesn't trust this, paper currency.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating, but it's this you get the idea. So, dislikes Jackson's politics, uses the scandal of Morgan's disappearance as a cudgel against Jackson at the national level and Martin Van Buren at the state level. Martin Van Buren, of course, will go on to be a president as well, but at this time period, Martin Van Buren is just an important figure in the state. I don't know if he's governor or not, but in New York. Both of these guys are aligned as Masons, and so Weed is using the whole Morgan thing. He's like blowing it up huge. He's got a scandal on his hands that he can use to whack at his opponents.
Yeah. I mean, it is pretty bad that a man was kidnapped and murdered just for speaking out against a group.
If he was murdered.
Well,
we know he was
true,
kidnapped
right.
so far.
Kidnapped.
Yes.
I mean, even that's pretty bad.
It's not a great thing for American liberty. But Edgar Allan Poe, right, was probably plied with alcohol, forced to vote, and then left in a gutter. So it happened. It happened.
Kidnappings happen, okay?
Don't cry for William Morgan. Think of all the awesome short stories we could have gotten if only Edgar Allan Poe had not been grabbed up. That's one version, by the way, of his death. Maybe you have your pet theory about how he died. That's one version of how he could have died. Palmer reports that the body recovered at the harbor had a heavy beard and a full head of hair, whereas Morgan was bald with a smooth face. Weed, in an effort to throw doubt on the body being Monroe's, said that the corpse had a grayish beard and long brown hair in contrast to Monroe's purportedly black hair and black beard. Afterward, Weed was accused...
Well, he wouldn't have any hair if he was a rotted corpse for a year.
Well, your hair might still be attached. I don't know.
You think?
I have no idea.
And you're in the water and stuff? I imagine you wouldn't even have skin anymore once you floated for a year.
The fishes will have got you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Come on, we do have people who listen who are involved in this sort of thing, so write in, guys. What would be left of you if you floated in the water for an actual year in New York before climate change? So you would have frozen maybe for a little while.
Oh, so maybe that would have
That might have preserved you.
Yeah.
But you also would have gotten through an entire summer.
Oh.
With all the algae and the fishes and things. Anyway, Weed was accused of having the corpse shaved and the hair plucked from the head and shoved into the nostrils and ears so that the corpse would better resemble Morgan. Whether or not that happened is neither here nor... Who knows? Who knows? A Mason on the scene said that after we had proven that the body found at Oak Orchard, it was Timothy Monroe. So this is what happened. this is a very famous moment between Thurlow Weed and a Mason. This random Freemason turns to Thurlow Weed and says, "After we have proven that the body found at Oak Orchard is Timothy Monroe, what will you do for a Morgan?" Weed infamously replied that Monroe would make a good enough Morgan, either until the election or, in Weed's account, until the real Morgan was found.
You don't say that to your political enemy. What? Some random
Just writing
guy.
it down,
Yeah.
sending it to the
What?
newspaper. Yeah, so that's the idea. I mean, is that Weed, the theory is that Weed knew all along
That it wasn't.
wasn't Morgan, but he was allowing people to
Believe it.
bandy around
Sure.
the conspiracy
I mean, it makes sense.
his political benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just mention the name Jeffrey Epstein and carry on. Again, politics.
Mm-hmm.
When it works to your advantage, great. But when it turns against you, not
Yep.
great.
You're stupid for thinking this is important.
Right.
Sorry.
A grand gathering of Masons made a proclamation against what had happened to Morgan. They said, "Resolved by this grand chapter that we, its members, individually and as a body, do disclaim all knowledge or approbation of the proceedings in relation to the abduction of the said William Morgan, and that we disapprove of the same as a violation of the majesty of the laws and an infringement of the rights of personal liberty secured to every citizen of our free and happy republic." This did nothing to prevent an anti-Masonic political party from forming and thriving, especially in New York State, Pennsylvania, and Vermont for several years, nor did it prevent groups of men from quitting the Masons and then forming new groups of Masonic renouncers. These are big states at the time, right? We don't have 50 states, right, in 1826. So this is a big deal that 3 whole states are full of anti-Masons. 44 years later, Weed reflected on the events of the Morgan affair as one of the only remaining living witnesses. So Weed wrote this, there's a 2-volume book, an autobiography and a biography of Weed. Weed claimed to have maintained good relations with several of the conspirators in spite of being on the opposing side, and named Colonel Simeon Jewett as one of these conspirators. Weed was not viewed kindly for his baldly political motivations during the investigation. After all, we want to get at the truth of a man who was abducted. The press, he recalled, was unsparing in its denunciations of me, and the public judgment of my conduct was anything but flattering.
Well, then act more flattering, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Playing
Weed.
politics with a corpse.
Yeah, right.
Weed also claimed that his recollections matched official Masonic accounts of the event as confirmed by Freemason friends, including John A. Kennedy. Weed said one of Morgan's associates had approached him as a printer about printing the original book that Morgan had written, but Weed's partner was a Freemason, and so he declined, indirectly sending Morgan on to Miller. So maybe Weed was involved in the story even earlier,
Oh,
like back to when Morgan decided to publish this book.
interesting.
The next Weed said he heard of Morgan was after Morgan disappeared. Weed published an editorial accusing overzealous members of the order for Morgan's disappearance and was met by angry advertisers who withdrew from his paper. Weed's partner, the Freemason, handed him a document committing Masons to exact terrible retribution on anyone who exposed their secrets. With the newspaper near total financial ruin, Weed handed his half of the business over to his partner to save it from going bankrupt and set about creating a new anti-Masonic newspaper. So, a lot of enmity in all this. In his recollections, Weed adds a few features to the account of what befell Morgan, which have to be viewed through the lens of Weed's anti-Masonry. While Morgan was in jail, the constable came to visit Morgan's house and took several manuscripts with him, he says. Nicholas Cheeseborough, master of the Canandaigua Lodge, instigated the innkeeper Kinsley to issue a warrant for Morgan's arrest after Morgan had borrowed a shirt and cravat from him. This is Weed's version, but again, perfectly plausible. In that case, anyway. After Morgan was arrested on trumped-up charges, Miller was similarly arrested and carted around New York before finally being acquitted and brought safely home. So the publisher, they tried to get him too, and they just couldn't figure out how to arrest him, so they sent him back home. Weed also claims that someone cried murder before Morgan was carted off from the jail by a crew of Masons. Weed shared the story of a man named Richard Howard, who was believed to be involved in the Morgan conspiracy. Howard, a bookbinder in Buffalo, fled to New York when he believed he was about to be arrested, and the Masons gathered their funds and sent him on to Europe, where he was never heard from again. In New York, as Weed relates it, Howard confessed to have been one of the persons who executed Morgan. So this episode comes with not one, but two mysterious disappearances.
Okay.
So the Masons paid. This guy was involved in the Morgan affair, and the Masons purportedly paid to ship him off.
According to Weed, though, right?
Yes, according to Weed. He's our source for this, so we got to take it with a grain.
Mm-hmm.
In his autobiography, Weed said that he'd been tried for libel for accusing General Jacob Gould in his newspaper of funding Whitney and Smith's flight to New Orleans. Whitney and Smith involved in the Morgan affair as well.
Right.
Whitney famously not doing anything for his family or setting up his affairs, just like booking it to New Orleans.
Yeah.
Whitney was among the witnesses that Weed had called to his defense in the libel suit. And this is where things get interesting. After the trial, Weed says they all went out for dinner together. All these enemies, these guys who hated each other, went out for dinner together. Whether Whitney, who had spent time in jail for the Morgan affair, which was, by the way, prosecuted in part by Weed, would then share a meal with Weed, is really, that's the question, right? So Weed was a prosecutor, sent this guy to jail. Weed says he got him back to testify for him at his libel suit, and then they were buddies. They got to hang out afterwards. So bygones be bygones.
Okay.
But it's important, like, we have to choose to believe whether this dinner happened or not, because what Weed claims happens at this dinner is monumental.
Okay.
For today's conversation. Weed says that at the dinner, one of Whitney's companions encouraged him to make a clean breast of it and free your mind. Whitney then told Weed that when Morgan was being held in Niagara, word came to the Americans that the Canadian Masons were unwilling to hold him any more. Whitney was among a group who went to collect Morgan, telling him that arrangements had been made for his removal to the interior of Canada. Here, said Whitney, either shore being 2 miles distant, a rope was wound several times around Morgan's body, at either end of which a large weight was attached. Up to that time, Morgan had conversed with them about his new home and the probability of being joined by his family in Canada, but when he saw the rope, and the use to be made of it, he started fighting with them. He struggled desperately, and held firmly with one hand to the gunwale of the boat. Garside, one of the people there, detached it, but as he did, so Morgan caught Garside's thumb in his mouth and bit off the first joint.
Jeez.
When the company remarked that Weed could hang Whitney now on his confession, Whitney said Weed could, but he wouldn't.
Yeah, he's cool now. We went to dinner together.
We have to believe this conversation happened to believe Weed's story.
Mm-hmm.
He said he'd been plagued by horrible dreams since the murder, Whitney that is, and felt better having unburdened himself. Whitney died in 1869.
Where's the dude with the missing thumb? We gotta find that
Yeah,
guy.
where's the one-armed man?
So also, but that implies that they were planning on keeping him in Canada.
Yes.
And then they were gonna just let him loose in the Canadian wilds with his family.
Give him money to stay quiet and disappear. That's a witness protection program almost. So they're like gonna write him a check if he just doesn't come back. And if he comes back, it'll be nothing but trouble for him. I mean, they've scared him pretty well.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
that's true. They did, like, kidnap him and hold him for a bit.
It's a bit of mafia activity.
Yeah.
But without, putting a gun in the back of your head. He said he'd been plagued by... Okay, so Whitney died in 1869, and by most reports, hated Weed at his death.
Okay.
And this is long before Weed is telling this story.
Okay.
Weed's account is published in 1883.
Okay.
So there's no one to dispute him that this conversation happened.
Got it.
All the witnesses to Weed's supposed after-trial dinner were dead by the time
Of course.
Weed told this story. Yes. And it is very difficult to imagine these two, who had been such enemies, coming together, and that Whitney then confesses and says, nah, he won't send me to jail for this.
Right. And Weed wouldn't use that against him?
It's so bizarre. It's a very strange...
I mean, he tried to use some other poor man's body as like a fake political move and stuff. I don't know.
But Weed really wants us to believe this before he dies in 1883, 1884
well,
or something
I'm not
like this.
convinced, Weed.
Weed's word is not all we have to go on. Whitney had issued his own confession before his death.
Okay.
He said that he had worked with one other man and that they had gone to DeWitt Clinton, then governor of New York, and remember with the Erie Canal, and secured the promise of up to $1,000 to bribe Morgan. Whitney traveled with his associate Cheeseborough to Batavia, where they met Morgan at the Danold Tavern and had dinner with him. Morgan.
So now Morgan's just in Canada at a tavern.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
well, he's not. He's in Batavia. He's in New York right now.
Oh, he hasn't been kidnapped yet.
He's about to be, yes. So there's $1,000 at play.
Got it.
To bribe the guy.
Got it.
Morgan, not knowing that they could offer up to $1,000, accepted $500.
That was smart.
Yeah, they got him there.
They did.
And he volunteered to be taken to Canada to be placed as far away as possible from Miller on the promise that his family would be taken care of. Weed corroborated that Mrs. Morgan was informed that her husband was not dead and received a visitor named Thomas McCulley who said her family would be taken care of. So Weed agrees that those things happened.
Okay.
The arrest was orchestrated because the Masons didn't trust Morgan to follow through on his agreement. So they meet him at the bar. They're like, "Here's $500. Get out of here." But then they go back to their lodge, and they're like,
Hey, he's a liar.
"Yeah, he's lying to us all the time. We gotta kidnap this guy and get him out of here ourselves."
Okay.
Yeah. At Fort Niagara, Whitney and Cheeseborough passed Morgan on to a pair of Canadian Masons who brought him on horseback to Hamilton, Ontario, which is a place where I have actually done some performing.
Oh.
Yeah, I've brought shows to that region. There, they paid Morgan his $500, had him sign a document promising not to return, and sent him on his way.
Okay.
Weed added the possibility, dismissed at the time, that Morgan had been passed on to the Mohawk Indians to be transferred to the British Northwest Fur Company. When Morgan's disappearance caused an uproar, the party went to collect Morgan at Hamilton again, but he had vanished and would never be heard from again.
That feels a lot more believable to me.
You like the Whitney version? I personally like the Whitney version too, yeah.
It makes sense that this guy who obviously didn't care about his family very much was given a ton of money and was like, I can go start a new life.
$500 was a lot of money.
And he was already a grifter and a liar, so he takes that money, changes his name, and is just gone.
I think it worked out for him, right? In his mind, he was going to write this book, but screw it.
Yeah.
I got my paycheck, and these guys seem like they're pretty miffed, so I'm not going to annoy them anymore and risk consequences.
They did kidnap me. Whoa.
Yeah, let's get out of here.
All right, I'll take my money.
I'm not coming back, you guys. A lot of the furor around anti-Masonry, which flamed up and died out fairly quickly as a national movement in America, centered around the idea that Masons took oaths of allegiance and secrecy, which could supersede their commitment to the Republic and its laws. Then President John Quincy Adams called Masonry a seed of evil, which can never produce any good. Remember, Adams is on the opposite side of Jackson.
Right.
Jackson's the Mason. And called for Masonry to be abolished, although he forgave Masons who had joined before Morgan's disappearance for not understanding the full import of their oaths. The Morgan affair was a kind of worst-case scenario if this were true, with Masons committing a horrible act and then using their connections with communities and legal systems to cover it up or otherwise get away with it. So it's a classic conspiracy theory that comes very close to reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We imagine there are these Illuminati infiltrating the upper echelons of government and that they can't be touched and that they're going to ruin all our stuff. I mean, it's really just big tech, but but I'm not really joking. I mean, it's the conspiracy of billionaires, right? That they can get away with murder. They can do whatever they want. But when it literally, so that's the way people thought about Masons at this time period.
Interesting. I mean, because it actually is proven that man was kidnapped and taken away.
Yes.
but then people did pay for it.
Well,
right?
Yes, yeah.
Some people were arrested for it.
You can't just kidnap a guy.
Yeah.
They were arrested. They went to jail.
Well,
unlike billionaires today, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. This is pretty serious violation of a man's rights. But yeah, anyway. White-collar crime versus other crimes.
Yes. Yes. But,
so.
Yeah, because I was about to say, well, I guess they were kind of proven right. But then, the Masons are still around and they didn't really but the people who were responsible in the Masons were arrested for it. It wasn't like the organization said, no, we didn't agree with that. We didn't want them to do that.
They came out against it, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know that it was. There was a bit of a conspiracy, but the conspiracy didn't function in the way that in that worst case scenario mindset because people didn't really get away with it unless they did get away with murder.
Right.
because nobody got charged or tried for murder. And I want to be clear. I mean, my billionaire example, I don't want you to think that the Masons are all billionaires. They're not. They're a lot of regular guys.
Yeah.
But some of the elite are Masons and some aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. The most prominent anti-Masons like Weed weren't ever especially concerned with Masonry. William H. Seward, a close Confederate of Weed's, so close that his picture accidentally graces the cover of the Google ebook of Weed's autobiography. This was profoundly confusing for me, yes. Because I wanted to read Weed's autobiography, and I kept seeing this picture of Seward.
Weird.
Yeah. And because I was doing all this research of this time period and Masonry and anti-Masonry, I knew what Seward looked like.
Uh-huh.
Threw me off. Anyway.
So Weed is not on the cover of his own autobiography?
In the Google ebook, it's accidentally William H. Seward. Yeah, I'm sure probably, some bot or something had to populate an image and it just grabbed Seward's picture accidentally. Because, for those of you who heard my last episode, AI don't know shit.
Mm-hmm.
Weed first met Seward in 1824 when Seward's carriage wheel was damaged passing through Rochester, and Weed came to help. What a strange turn of events. Weed and Seward bonded over a shared belief that the government had a role in maintaining roads and canals.
He's there on the side of the road being like, the government should fucking fix this shit.
Yeah. I mean, all my socialists out there, you actually would politically agree, I think, with Weed on a lot of points.
Uh-huh.
Anyone who thinks the government has a role to play in health, safety, and maintenance, you're with Weed. You may not agree with his actions around this event, but politically, you probably would have been okay with him. In New York, anti-Masonry overlapped, as I said, with anti-Jacksonian politics, and in 1830, Weed got Seward the nomination for the anti-Masonic Party for state senate, but his focus was on penal reform and infrastructure. Very, just not as sensational, right?
Mm-hmm.
The main qualifications for membership in the anti-Masonic Party were a dislike for Jackson's quasi-imperial presidency and, almost incidentally, not being a member of the Freemasons. So really, if you hated Jackson, they would let you into the anti-Masonic Party even if you happened to be a Freemason.
That's okay.
Then
sure.
They'd be like, oops, oh, right, we were supposed to ask you about the Freemasonry thing. Right, that's the other thing that we care about. Henry Clay, for example, was a strong anti-Jacksonian who Weed liked, as I mentioned, but could not be the anti-Masons presidential candidate when Jackson ran for his second term because Clay was a Mason. Oops. It's just like an accident of history.
Yeah.
Seward, like Weed, would leave his anti-Masonry behind when the Whig Party formed and go on to serve as governor of New York, United States Senator, and for those of you who recognized his name, it's probably because he was Secretary of State to Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War.
Oh.
Yeah, serious dude.
So yeah, he moved up a lot.
He's probably the most important anti-Mason, like in terms of like federal government.
But then he ends up dropping it.
Well, yeah, ages before he becomes Secretary of State. But of all those guys, Henry, anyway, it's him. And Weed is important insofar as he advances the careers of guys like Seward.
Mm.
Weed's account, even decades after the events in question, had almost nothing to do with a principled stand against Masonic codes or culture. Instead, Weed was focused on the true crime details of the case itself, perhaps even going so far as to manufacture a confession to corroborate his version of events. So he's not, when you read Weed writing all these decades later, he's not like, but Masons are evil, you have to understand. He just doesn't care. What he wants you to understand is that his version of this very famous crime is correct. That's all he wants to persuade you of.
Oh, God.
Not that his politics or, his principles were justified.
That's what he's that worried about.
But the events. Well, because here we are. Nobody has heard this man's name, right? He was right, in a way, to try to set the record in his favor. Because here, in 2025, we are only talking about Thurlow Weed because of the William Morgan affair.
Fair enough.
He saw how history would regard him. I'm happy to add that he was also a political boss who was partially responsible for Seward's elevation. I'm happy to add the anti-Jacksonian stuff, but we're only talking about him because of the Morgan affair.
Interesting. And he coincidentally did it when nobody else was alive to tell the...
Yes, he knew exactly what he was doing. He was hoping that I wouldn't be thinking that deeply about it all these years later, but sorry,
Just
Weed.
take my word for it.
Sorry, man. Us scholars, we read between the lines. So, the Whitney in Weed's account trusts Weed not to further pursue the matter, and he's haunted on a human level for having taken a human life. In other words, Morgan's disappearance is not so much a grand political event as it is a crime committed against an individual. Finally, what happened to Morgan is more important than why it happened. It boils down to just a very interesting case of true crime.
Yeah. That was interesting.
Going to credit David Miller for illustrations of masonry by one who has devoted 30 years to the subject. Also, The Life of Thurlow Weed, Volume 1, which was written by Thurlow Weed. Volume 2 is written by like his grandson or something.
Oh, okay.
And it's a third-person account of what you read in Volume 1 from a first-person account. Editor Harriet Weed. What's interesting about his grandson's account, I think it's his grandson, is that he doesn't even get into all the details of the Morgan affair.
Oh, really?
Because Volume 1, his grandfather's very focused on recounting the details of the Morgan affair. I think that Volume 2, the purpose of that is to like lay out the career of this great man, which needs to like then skip over the giant scandal that he was a central player in.
So did he do that after Weed died?
No, it was published after Weed died, but I believe he was like interviewing Granddad, right? And like reading his papers and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I'm like, I can't imagine that would be a very interesting book.
It's not.
Oh, okay.
Volume 1 is a page turner.
I bet.
If you're into this stuff, yeah, I was way into. But I started reading Volume 2 and I was like, wait, because I looked for it. I was looking for the Morgan affair, and the man, like his grandson, just like literally likes a paragraph and then he moves on.
Come on.
It's a clear exercise in reputational cleansing of the Weed family name. Ah, yes, the Weeds. Last but not least, I want to give credit to John C. Palmer for his book, The Morgan Affair and Anti-Masonry. It's an old book, but it is a good one on this subject. All right, then. I hereby adjourn and declare closed this meeting of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors until such a time as we get together and do it again. My name is Dr. Rob C. Thompson, joined by Savannah Barrett, sister of the 84th degree.
Goodbye. Don't go kidnapping and murdering anybody.
Do not kidnap and murder. You were thinking about it. I know you were till you listened to this episode.
You thought you could take them to Canada and throw them down a river and get away with it.
But it is going to be a mess.
It'll turn up a year later.
Yes, and there will be whole political parties that organize around your personal defeat. Men will be on their deathbeds talking about you and what you did. Join us next time here on Occult Confessions. We are going to delve into another murder, another series of murders, now 16 murders, serial killing that was not done by a serial killer, but a man trying to turn a profit. Of course, we're talking about the Burke and Hare murders. Maybe you've heard these before if you're a true crime aficionado. If not, we will be introducing you to these stories because, yet again, the Burke and Hare murders introduce the case, in this case, not the victim, but one of the criminals disappears without a trace, here on Occult Confessions.